Now, only one person introduced himself today as a new person, and that's Eric, who has moved here 4 days ago. So I think a little explanation of this service is in mind. First of all, I'm not the permanent pastor, and so if you don't like what goes on today, give it another try. Now, before I became the pastor here, which was in 1975, David Jacobson introduced a dialogue sermon, what it's called. That is, the sermon is given, and then there is a discussion. And today we are going to revise that just slightly, because I'm going to make some comments about hell first, and then ask for your opinion, and then I'll make some comments about heaven and ask for your opinion. And so it's a little bit different than it normally is. So it's going to be interactive. And I was going to bring my iPad to make it really modern, but I decided not to. And you may have noticed that you don't hear too much about hell in Presbyterian circles these days. Now, hell is still on the books, but for me, at least, and a lot of clergy that I know, hell has changed locations. As a child, I was taught that, and believed it, of course, because when you're a child, you believe everything that the minister says, your parents say, and so forth, for a while, and then you go elsewhere. I was taught that it was a real place, and there was a real possibility that I would end up there. And supposedly the location was in the afterlife, created by the creator of existence, himself. God Almighty himself designed it as an eternal torture chamber for those who didn't go along with what he asked, required, said, or whatever. That idea and description paints the Almighty as a monster, is what I came to believe after a while. It makes him out far worse than anyone who is involved in domestic violence, any serial killer, or any mass murderer. The way I understood it as a child is that 99% of all humanity would end up there, because there was only one single way to ever even get to the door. Everybody else went down to hell. Finally, I concluded that the explanation itself was wrong. And thank God, the God that supposedly made up that and created that place never has existed, doesn't exist now, and never will exist. That description of God was invented by a fear-filled mind of a sincere believer who mistakenly hearkened back to the nature of religions, where, among other things, thunder, lightning, storms, floods, and all such things were the sounds and the sights of an angry God who was delving out punishments for disobedience. So, if your house was wiped out by a fire, something had gone on with you that caused it, and God was just getting back at you. Or if a flood came and wiped out a town, it meant that whole town were filled with sinners and evil people who refused to repent, and so God wiped them off the face of the ground. That said, if God were a human being in the United States today, he could sue for defamation of character. For hell, now for me, has moved from the afterlife to the here and now. Several examples. The people who were in the airplane yesterday, one moment they were in heaven, looking out the left side to Stanford and all the beautiful place, over on the right side across the water to Oakland and whatever, and all of a sudden they were in hell. It moved up just like that from heaven to hell. Worldwide, there are 91 countries more violent than the United States. Guatemala being the most violent, the most dangerous place on earth for the general population, and we, fortunately, are 91st down the list. More than 100,000 people, it's estimated, have been killed in Syria from the beginning of that conflict in March of 2011. Now those people are living in hell. And you can see it very clearly just by watching TV and seeing what the country looks like. Civilian deaths in Iraq are estimated to be 120,000 minimum. So just think the 120,000 lost their lives, but think of the husbands and the wives and the children and the grandparents and the friends who are suffering now because of that death. So it just spreads out, where hell is not the experience of one person, but literally of thousands around the world. Hell can also be internal. It can go on within us. Addiction is a very difficult and horrible thing to face, and it's a form of hell. The most poignant anti-drinking song that I know is called Whiskey Lullaby, and I read one of the verses for you. It's about a man and a woman who deeply loved one another but couldn't get along. She put him out like a burning end of a midnight cigarette. She broke his heart. He spent his whole life trying to forget. We watched him drink away his pain a little at a time, but he never could get drunk enough to get her off his mind. Until that night, when he put that bottle to his head and pulled the trigger. We found him face down in a pillow with a note that said, "I'll love her until the day I die." And when we buried him beneath the willow, the angels sang the whiskey lullaby. That's hell. The second verse of the song is sung by the woman, and it's the very same thing, except from her standpoint. And the poignant words there are that they put the bottle to their head and pulled the trigger. I talked with an alcoholic a few weeks ago, and I said, "How are you staying clean?" And he said, "Well, I just pretend that out of a wine bottle or any other kind of bottle of booze, a rattlesnake comes when I put that drink up to my mouth, and that's the visualization that I have that helps me realize the kind of poison I'm about to put in myself." Hell is alive and well during panic attacks, or when people are depressed, and it goes on and on and on, lasting days and months and years, and sometimes decades. Now, many religious people believe that those who commit suicide go directly to hell forever, and there's no chance. But I don't believe that at all. I believe that they are in hell, and they are now killing their body in order to get out. And I believe they actually do that too. Hell is what many women experience from men with men who dominate societies, and in some cases religions too. The latest revelation is women in the United States military. So there are other forms of hell: being kidnapped, being enslaved, being raped in any form of the word, being tortured, lied to, or lied about. All of these are hells. A final illustration, and then I'll open it up for you to respond. A U.S. soldier named Daniel Summers committed suicide about a month ago. In 2007, he was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, Gulf War syndrome, and a host of other medical problems. He sought treatment through therapy, medication, music, and film production, but it didn't work. He wrote this note: "My body has become nothing but a cage, a source of pain and constant problems. The illness I have has caused me pain that not even the strongest medicines could dull. There is no cure. All day, every day, a screaming agony in every nerve ending in my body. It is nothing short of torture. My mind is a wasteland filled with visions of incredible horror, unceasing depression, and crippling anxiety." That man was in hell. So now, I ask you to just call out other forms of hell that you have either experienced yourself, or that you know somebody who has experienced, or maybe just intellectually you know that certain things are.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
rheumatoid arthritis, you said?
Arthritis.
Arthritis, okay, thank you.
Cancer.
Cancer? No.
Extreme poverty.
Loss of a loved one.
Loss of a loved one, yeah.
Feelings of separation.
Feelings of separation, is that what you said? Okay.
Alzheimer's degeneration.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. For everybody.
Teen online bullying.
I totally lost that.
Teen online bullying.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Unemployment.
Absolutely. See, this is the beauty of a dialogue kind of thing, because I hadn't thought of any of those things.
I heard on the radio this morning in Egypt, there are gangs of men raping women. They drive them away from the crowd, and people come to help and then don't help. And beyond that, they're not listened to. There's no justice for them.
Right. There was a horrible story in the IJ this morning. 40 children were murdered in a school in Nigeria for getting an education. So we obviously have a lot of work to do, right? Now, heaven on earth. We can experience heaven on earth as well. Being in love is one that comes to my mind first. I mean, that was just the very first one. And if you've ever been in love, you know, you're kind of crazy and not too rational, but boy, does it feel good. I was, when I first got into meditation, I was reading a lot of Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogananda was the first Hindu missionary to the United States. And he said that during authentic lovemaking, that is as close to heaven as we'll ever get on earth. That's pretty good. Eating a wonderful meal with somebody that we love, with our family, or the family that we have chosen to adopt as our own. A Course in Miracles has a wonderful take on heaven. It says, heaven is where two enemies now become fast friends. Well, I love that definition. So we could see the transformation that's happened between the United States and Germany, the United States and Japan, how we have become fast friends and partners, and where once we were just out to kill each other. So again, the definition is heaven is where two enemies now become fast friends. Listening to music can send you to heaven. I mean, didn't we go over a little bit of heaven there? By the way, those of you who don't know, Paul Thorne is an actual person. He wrote this, and he's a phenomenal performer. And his father is a Pentecostal minister, and his uncle is a pimp. I'm not making this up, folks. And he has an album called Pimps and Preachers. And he's a wonderful performer. He sells his stuff. You know, he has all the doodads that professional touring musicians have. He has CDs and all that stuff. So this is his pitch. He says, you know, just before this concert night, I was talking to my daddy. My daddy said, I want to tell you something. If you don't buy Paul's stuff, you're gonna go to hell. He's a funny guy. You gotta go see him when he's in town, which is coming up in a few weeks. Listen to these words by Van Morrison. Have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one above you? Fill my heart with gladness, take away my sadness, ease my troubles. That's what you do. Boy, isn't that great? Bob Dylan, Shelter from the Storm. Suddenly I turned around and she was standing there with silver bracelets on her wrists and flowers in her hair. She walked up to me so gracefully and took my crown of thorns. Come in, she said, I'll give you shelter from the storm. There's a wonderful song by Jimmy Cliff. I don't know if he actually wrote it or not, but it's called Sunshine in the Music. And it's a very happy, lighthearted, wonderful song. And one of the lines is, music is the food of heaven. Don't you love that? Heaven is also living our life dream. Now, I have lived my life dream. I've had a few nightmares along the way. You know, most people who have lived their life dream have had a few nightmares along the way. But largely, I mean, vocationally, I did what I wanted to do. I was here for a number of years and had a good time. And another form of heaven, of living my dream life, is Linda and I have been married 30 years.
Wow.
And that's a good way to live. So now I ask you, what are other forms of heaven that I haven't mentioned, or that you perhaps have experienced, or you know somebody who has?
The birth of a child or a grandchild?
Oh, I wonder why you said that. They are new grandparents. And her name is, you said?
Cella Rumi.
Tella Rumi. Nice name.
Well, to continue your music theme, to just inject a quick story, my son-in-law was playing the piano the other day, and my daughter and everyone else was just listening. And this 9-month-old decided she would sing. So everyone else was quiet, and in the quiet, she started.
Pretty good. That'd be nice to have that recorded. That would be fun. That's right. Any others?
Pets.
Pets, yeah. Wonderful thing about pets. Nova did a special that was fabulous about dogs. And when a mother has a child and when she is breastfeeding, something goes on in the brain. And there was a word for it, but I don't remember what the word is. Ralph might know the name of it. It's a particular substance that is created. And what that does, it allows the mother to instantly love the baby. And what they have found out now is that when you have a dog and you are stroking the dog, that same thing happens in your brain, and that same thing happens in the dog's brain. And they went on to say that the people who own dogs live longer, are healthier, and there's one other thing, I forgot what it was, but it's one other very good thing about it. Oh, I know, if you have a heart attack, you recover quicker. Those were the things that were on the special. It's a wonderful special. Thank you for mentioning that. Excuse me?
Does that apply for cats?
I'm sure it applies to cats to some degree, but I don't.
When one of your sermons, you said when you die, you want to come back as a dog in horrendous. So that must be your idea of heaven.
That is. That's a pretty high echelon outfit.
George, I'll combine that with the music of the dog. When Jerry Garcia was singing one time in Detroit, and my sister was driving him to one of the concerts, and her big standard poodle was in the back of the van with him, and he started to howl, and then Jerry started to sing with him, and then they started to sing and howl in harmony. And this went on for she'd never heard her dog do that. And Jerry totally got into it. So.
I bet you got into it. That's a good introduction to our final hymn, our final day, which is a song called "Howlin' at the Moon." It's amazing how these things happen. Yeah.
Going to someplace special, whether it's they should go regularly for a vacation or maybe someplace new that you just is that beautiful and you want to be there.
Nice.
Doing an act of kindness.
Yeah.
Art.
Art, you bet.
Feeling that you have a purpose, that the talents that God gave you are being gainfully employed.
Absolutely.
Receiving an act of kindness.
Garden.
Having a job that's interesting, fun, and rewarding.
Yeah. You bet.
Reaching the pinnacle of an athletic purpose or something.
Yes.
The light of a sunrise or a sunset.
Very good.
Forgiveness.
Thank you.
Community celebration.
Somebody else had a hand. Hank.
When my wife was dying in a coma, I kissed her on her forehead and I said,
going to wrap this up with, I had a dream about heaven, and this is the dream. I'm a student. My teacher is some unidentified but extremely wise person. He or she says, the heaven located in the afterlife is rehab. All humans are spiritual beings who are adventurous and are always ready for something new. And most are exhausted by the time they arrive, so they spend a few weeks to a few months to a few years to recover before setting off on their next excursion. Those who commit suicide or who are tortured, kidnapped, raped, or experience a horrible life and death stay longer. There is no need to rush them. Now I see something on the table. I walk over and see it's a pastry that has been placed on a beautiful dish. Upon closer inspection, I see the pastry itself is a fresh out of the oven cinnamon roll covered with dark chocolate. That is heaven.